Well, good morning and hello, everybody, on this Wednesday, December the 8th. The early word, Hebrews chapter 12, verses 5 through 13. That's where we are going to hang out this morning and looking at this notion of divine discipline. Divine discipline. Good morning, Dennis and Sydney, Don, Bashar. Good to have you on bright and early here today. And I want to talk just for a few minutes about this notion of discipline and how discipline is an actual exhibition of love for those in your proximity, so long as you exercise that discipline in a kind way. Growing up in Southern Illinois, I was very blessed. This was, hey, good morning, Becky. Good morning, John, as well. I was very blessed to have two parents who deeply loved me and my siblings. I'm the oldest of five, and discipline was definitely a prominent feature in the Grant household in Southern Illinois growing up. And my dad in particular was the disciplinarian. He was the one that seemed to, when boundaries were crossed or things were done or words were said that were not in alignment with what had been established as this is the way to go, there was discipline that followed. Good morning, Carol. Glad you're here as well. Hey, Ashley. And so that was not uncommon. But the thing is I don't have any recollection of looking back and thinking in my mind that my parents didn't love me because of their discipline of me. Now, I do remember growing up and recognizing that some of my friends, it seemed like their parents didn't discipline them as much, or they had more freedoms than I did. I remember in particular, this was before cell phones, so there wasn't the ability to just call people individually, but you had to call a landline, right? And if the person had to be there, and if you actually occupied the landline, you're on the phone, then whoever else tried to call during that time would get a busy signal. And you remember that? Anybody remember landlines? And there was no such thing as call waiting, and not everybody on the house had their own phone. And so my dad's business line was actually tied to the house landline, and so we all had at max 15-minute time limits to be on the phone. And if we crossed that, then there was consequences to that. And I remember thinking how it wasn't fair because my friends seemed to get to stay on the phone longer than I did and all that kind of stuff. But I never questioned, because my parents were very intentional with their discipline, that they loved me or didn't love me. And I didn't think, because at times my dad would, like, it wouldn't just be losing privileges. I mean, there was early on, I remember we got spanked and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a part of growing up. And I don't have a negative, visceral reaction to it, because I think it was done with love and kindness and explanation. It was done with love and kindness and explanation. And there's this notion sometimes out there in the culture that to be loving is to be 100% permissive of everything, whether that be in someone's life or someone's lifestyle, whether that be in parenting, to let them explore things, that we need to be completely permissive of everything, because that's truly loving. And I would tell you that's truly not true. That's not true. I mean, that's just crazy talk, like, you're not going to be fully permissive of your kid doing whatever they want, because that's loving. It's like, hey, Elise, that's my daughter. Go play in this tree. You want to play in this tree? Well, I'm going to let you do that. And I know cars are going to come by, but that's okay. Like, I love you. And since you want, I'm going to permit that. No, like, I'm going to keep boundaries up. I'm going to, at times, if she crosses those boundaries, have consequences to reinforce those boundaries. Not because I am a authoritarian dictator trying to rule over her life, but because she's my daughter, he's my son, and because I love him, I love her, and I want the best for them. And so I'm going to have discipline. I share all that because that's what we're looking at here when it comes to God. The author of Hebrews in chapter 12, verses 5 through 13, is speaking about God's divine discipline. He says this, he says, and have you forgotten the encouraging words that God spoke to you as children? So he starts off by, don't forget, these are encouraging words, not discouraging words. These are meant to be words that encourage you. That word encourage means to breathe confidence into you. Okay, so this is supposed to breathe confidence into you. He says, and these are the words that he spoke. He said, my child, Don't make light of the Lord's discipline, and don't give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those that he loves, and he punishes each one he accepts as his child. That when you experience discipline, it is an affirmation of God's love. And that should breathe courage and confidence into you. Verse 7 says, as you endure this divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Now, sadly, sometimes this parallel of God as divine dad and being a good parent to his son and a daughter gets skewed because we do not have good examples of earthly moms and dads. And sometimes the discipline they do or don't do isn't done in a way that's constructive and beneficial. And so we might read this and filter it through our own personal earthly experience. But try, if that is your story, to see it in the best possible way. That humans fall short, but God is perfect. And so when he goes and he disciplines, he says he's treating you as his own children. Whoever heard of a child who is never disciplined by its father, right? Like, discipline is a part of the story. So we shouldn't be surprised by it. We should expect it. And not only should we not be surprised by it, we should desire it. Right? Because if God is a good God and a good father, and he's leading us in a direction he wants us to go, we want him to discipline. We want him to say, don't do that. Don't touch the stove. Not a good idea. Not going to be, there's consequence to that. Like, we want that. We should yearn for that. It says this, it says, if God doesn't discipline you, and he does all his own children, it means that you are illegitimate and you're not really his kid. So, like, if you're not experiencing God's discipline, then there's a whole other bag or can of worms right there, right? He says, since we respected our earthly fathers who disciplined us, shouldn't we submit even more to the discipline of the Father of our spirits and live forever? For our earthly fathers disciplined us for a few years, doing the best that they knew how. But God's discipline is always good. Maybe we should just say that, put that in the chat. God's discipline is always good. It's always good. He knows what he's doing. And it's good for us so that we might share in his holiness. No discipline. Okay, so yes, we should expect it. Yes, we should desire it. But don't make the mistake of thinking that it might be pleasant. He says no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's actually painful. I remember getting disciplined as a kid. How about you? I remember getting spanked. That was not enjoyable. Like, oh, yes, Father, please spank me again. Said no one. It hurt. Or you're not able to go out tonight with your friends, or you lost your keys to your car, or you have no privilege to talk on the phone, or no video games, whatever. It's not enjoyable. It's not enjoyable. It can be painful. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of righteousness or right living for those who are trained in this way. So take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak and lame will not fall but become strong. Perhaps at times, if you find yourself in circumstances that are difficult and even arduous, yes, there are times to consider maybe to chalk this thing up just to like this, the way the fallen world works. But also at times, perhaps God is working in and through the world to bring about some discipline in your life to steer your direction in a better way. Perhaps he's saying no to something now, ending a relationship, right? Or causing some hardship or whatever it is, because he has something else he's saying yes to later. I don't believe that God is punishing you with his discipline for your sin. That punishment for your sin has already taken place because that was what Jesus did. Jesus died on the cross for the punishment of sin. So when you experience the Lord's discipline, it's not punishing you because, you committed a big one, so boom, he's got you. He disciplines to give boundaries and good direction. He disciplines to give boundaries and good direction, not to punish you and be like, you broke my law, boom. Jesus took on that. So don't look around. It's like when life is hard or things don't go the way you think, or you feel like, man, I feel like the Lord is actually like causing things to be like an uphill battle right now. He's not a punishment. He's trying to shape you teach you, form you, and his discipline is good for you. One example of this, and I'll just kind of let this kind of settle. I heard a pastor this summer talk about COVID and the pandemic, and how a lot of Christians looked at the pandemic and thought to themselves, "Wow, this is a huge test. Like God is testing us, or maybe this is God's discipline of us. I don't know." But his read was, he said, "You know what? What if the pandemic was a form of God's discipline?" And I know that that's a massive statement, but he's like, what if the discipline of God, or what if the pandemic was a form of God's discipline to try to get us back in the right direction? And if you look at our lives pre-pandemic, many of us, our lives have been marked by a lack of margin, a lot of hustle and bustle, always going, saying yes to everything. Um, Maybe at times choosing entertainment, recreation, sports, kids stuff, work at the expense of family, all these other things. But then the pandemic, when everything shut down, you remember this perhaps. There was a period for a little bit, right, where the quietness and the stopping and the lack of cars on the freeway was like, oh, something started changing in your soul. Being like, man, it's almost like you got detoxed a little bit, and you're like, oh, there's something good about this. And what this pastor says, what if the pandemic was a form of discipline, and now, right now, on the backside of the pandemic is the testing. That God reminded us in his goodness, maybe through his discipline of the pandemic, to say this is how life is to be lived and prioritized. Counting each other's lives extremely significant. We started to count and value each other's lives as COVID was starting to take lives. We started to have a greater appreciation for life and even breath in our lungs. And so now is the test. Are we still going to live with that type of deep affinity and value of human life? The margin that we had created or forced upon us at times even, but it's still causing us to rest and to cease striving. Now is the test. Are we going to go back to the frenetic pace we did previous, or will we build in some boundaries and say less yes and more no? But when we say more no, it's saying yes to what matters most. All right? There's ways in which we can look at the world and we can say, God, perhaps you have discipline. Perhaps you are creating some obstacles. Perhaps you are coming down on me or on us or on this whole people or whatever. But what good father doesn't do that? What good father doesn't discipline his kids to help try to steer them in the right direction? I'm grateful for my dad. I'm grateful for my mom. I'm grateful for the discipline I received, because now at 41, I look back and I don't have a lot of memories of like, man, they're just such jerks. I can't believe they said no to I was like, no. Out of their love, they put boundaries and discipline. And it shaped me. And I'm grateful for that. And the same is true with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So today, maybe just take some inventory. Perhaps what you see as some big obstacle is actually an opportunity, because it's God's discipline and he's forming a better path for you. Who knows? But it seems like that's in nature with his character, because you are his dearly loved son or daughter. That's what I got. That's what I got. It's not to punish us, but to grow us and mature us in his eyes. Yes, yes, yes. So true, Carol. It's very much the case. Rob, thanks for your comments and being a part of this as well. Good having you all on. And I'm going to sign off now. I'm going to let that be the last word on the early word, and we'll pick back up tomorrow. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 14. And hope you'll join with me again. Have a great day. And even if it's painful, lean into perhaps God's discipline as an affirmation of his deep love for you. God bless you all.